Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, a safe and fun place to get real and learn about sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to guide you to go from good to amazing in the bedroom and your relationships. All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 290, and it is titled How to Awaken Your Erotic Self with Deborah Kagan. Now, what does that really mean to awaken your erotic self? We are, of course, going to explore what that means throughout this episode. But in general, what we're really talking about here is sexual awakening. And this is a topic that I love to talk about because, having been through one myself, but also having watched so many people and helped facilitate so many people have quote unquote sexual awakenings, it's something that is sort of near and dear to my heart. Most of us grow up, we're either given some sort of a religion or some sort of a, cultural system to follow, and most of them are extremely repressed when it comes to sexuality. Many times our parents don't want to talk about it at all. They don't even really want to answer our questions other than to just sort of brush them off. So we don't really learn any of this stuff, which means it's up to us as we get older and mature to go on our own journey towards learning what our sexuality is about, how to use it, what can we do with it, how powerful is it, all that kind of stuff. And I will say that the overwhelming majority of people that I know that have had sexual awakenings stumbled into it absolutely by accident. I would love to see more people consciously embark on this journey because there's a lot of healing to be had. And so my guest today is going to help us unpack this. She's going to talk about her own personal story of how she awoken her erotic self. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. But as usual, before we start, short word from my sponsor, Power and Mastery 3.0 is here. The men's sexual mastery program you have heard about on the show for a long time is now even better. I have personally reviewed every module, lesson, video, audio, and PDF to see if there's anything new that needed to be added. As a result, I've added 10 new videos, 1 new audio, 8 new PDFs, and dozens of links to hand-picked products to help support your journey to mastery. In addition, there's also a brand new user interface that makes it easier to navigate the course and find your course materials. So if you are ready to become the sexual master you have always wanted to be, then go now to powerandmastery.com. There is no better time than right now to finally become the sexual master you've always wanted to be. So go to powerandmastery.com. Okay, my guest today is Deborah Kagan. She is an author and mentor with years of practice being a turned-on woman. I can't wait to hear what that means for her. She supports entrepreneurs, small business owners, consultants, creatives, and the career-oriented to tap into their innate power and connect with their mojo, a source of true self-esteem. Her methods combine over 25 years of experience in personal development, metaphysical studies, and embodiment practices. She has a book that was released at the end of last year called Undressed: An Invitation to Claim Your Erotic Nature. Right, so we're going to definitely be asking about that today. And in it, she features real-life candid stories from her past personal, sexual, and relationship experiences. So that's definitely what we want to talk about today. So welcome to the show, Deborah.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you. It's sometimes listening to the bio is like, oh, who is that person? Do I know her today?
Right. I know it's kind of weird. I go on other people's shows too, and then I have to listen to them read my own bio, and I'm always like, oh, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. I think I know that guy.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So we're really talking today about sort of the journey that what we often call a sexual awakening. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on focusing on that term, but I did want to just maybe start with what it really means to awaken your erotic self. What does it mean to have a sexual awakening? Because I know that it's kind of like a generic term. Like a perfect example of this is I was at a party a couple of years ago with some friends, and I'm overhearing a friend of mine talk about her sexual awakening. And she said that phrase like 3 times. She's like, and when I had my sexual awakening, and then when I, my sexual awakening, and I'm sitting there going, I know you and your husband quite well. You haven't really had a sexual, like there's still a lot of sexual repression going on here in this relationship. But in her mind, she had had a sexual awakening. So I'm curious from your point of view, like what does it really mean to awaken your erotic self? What does it mean to have a sexual awakening?
It's interesting. I love the way that you shared that story there, because I think we can have sexual awakenings throughout our entire life. Do we ever fully, entirely like get to the mega sexual awakening of like all mother load sexual awakenings? Maybe. That's possible. I believe that, that's possible. I think it's more interesting to allow yourself to have what I would call your initial sexual awakening, because as I think you said in the intro, most of us, I haven't yet met someone who grew up with zero shame around their sexuality. So let's just say the majority of humans have shame around their sexuality. And so therefore there is something to let go of. There is a veil, a conditioning, beliefs to move through, so you can have an awakening where you are more connected to your sexuality. What is your sexuality? What pleases you? What turns you on? What feels good? That availability to be in exploration in your own sexual nature, right? And I think once we have that, let's say initial one where it's like this friend of yours was talking, and she was like, I've had the sexual awakening, I've had the sexual awakening. Something in her freed up more than it ever have. That's what I'm hearing from the story. And that is delicious, because anytime we can get more free and let ourselves go from whatever shackle is holding us back, that in itself is an awakening, in my opinion. Um, and I believe that we can have them ongoingly, because a lot of the stuff that holds us back is very hidden. It's what money, death, and sex, right, are like the things that people are really freaked out about having conversations around. And so the stuff that actually holds you back is deep, deep, and usually well hidden, right? And so the more that you free up, the more you uncover, then the more you can explore. And then you hit a new space and like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was possible. Wow, like here's this other awakening. That's my long answer for you.
Well, I actually really like that answer. I like how you have shown that there are levels of awakening. That you may have a certain level of sexual awakening, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other levels to go. And that for sure that was absolutely in her case. I don't deny that she did have something that shifted in her, but there was
Mhm.
still a long way to go.
Yeah.
I often have conversations with people around just levels of sort of consciousness in general, right? So people will say to me like, this person knows so much about health and healthy food and all this. How could they not know about this other thing over here? How could they be completely clueless, in this other area when they're so tapped in and so intelligent in this other area? And that one of the things that I always say when that topic comes up is, awakening isn't just like all of a sudden the light bulb pops on and everything. We wake up in little areas. There's a piece over here that we get, and then later on there's a piece over here that we get, right? And eventually, when enough of those pieces wake up, it seems like
Mhm.
oh, they just suddenly had an awakening, and now look at how wise they are. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, we get it piece by piece.
Yeah.
And I think the same is also true when it comes to our sexuality. We wake up sort of a piece at a time. And so we can have these multiple levels of awakening when it comes to our
Mhm.
sexuality.
Absolutely.
All right. So now that we kind of understand that, um, a lot of what I want to talk about today really has to do with your story, because I think personal stories are interesting and I think they
Mm.
do a great job of illustrating what it is that we're talking about. So I'm wondering if you could tell us about your story. And, for people to really understand, it means like, where were you before you had your first awakening? What was your sex life like? How did you operate in relationship when it comes to sexuality? What triggered potentially, this awakening, and, how did it go? Just all of that. And, I might pop in here and there to
Yes.
ask more questions,
Yes.
but I really want to talk about your process and how that worked for you.
Yeah, it was a very bumpy, rocky, interesting roller coaster of a ride. And I do believe, like all of us, I came back very free, very interested in my body, very interested in other bodies. And you mentioned my new book, Undressed. I write about in the introduction how when I was, I don't know, I think around 5, that I was playing doctor with the boy who lived across the street. And again, like when we come back as little people, we're just like, ooh, what is this rental vehicle that I've dropped into, of this thing called a human body? And ooh, what does this do? And what does that do? And oh, that's a vagina. And oh, that's a penis, right? We don't know these words necessarily when we first come back, but there's all this stuff to discover. And I felt like a very curious, very healthfully curious little person. And then somebody found us. I don't even remember who it was, right? And we got yelled at, and total shame just set in. And that was like the first moment of this layer of shame that, like, my body's wrong. You should not be talking about it or touching it, or certainly not exploring it with any other people around.
All right, I got to pause you just for 1 second
Yeah.
because I actually have a very, very similar story with the girl that lived next door. Just, pulling our pants down and like, hey, what's going on here,
What's
right?
yours? Yeah.
I will say though that fortunately for me, my response to that wasn't, "Oh my God, this is horrible. I should never do it again." My response was, "Oh shit, I got to be more careful and not get caught again."
Got it. So you did get caught, but okay,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. When you're that age, how can you not
Right.
get caught? You're quiet for five, no, you're quiet for 2 minutes and your parents like, what's going on? They're
Yeah.
quiet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting though, but that's also just a note of gender, here. It's interesting the way that you took it and the way that I took it,
Yeah,
right?
that is interesting.
And I think that that is fairly common, fairly common. Well, I'll leave that there. But in any case, so that was that. And my first actual experience of intercourse was not a lovely experience. It was rape, and it was somebody that I knew. I was dealing with coming out of functionally dysfunctional household, and I was not living at home anymore. And so this person broke in, and that happened. And it's obviously not the way I wanted it to happen. I was wanting to have sex. I really was, because I felt like ready and I was interested, and I was starting again to explore my body. I'm an early teen at this point and felt really good about most of it, let's say. And then that happened. And so that put a whole different spin on everything for quite a while. And all I wanted to do was numb out. And then it was like, okay, well, if my body is only here to be the experience was my body was just here to be, let's say, used and misused, right, by others, that I started to seek out other experiences and having sex with people that, maybe weren't the best for me at the time. And that was all that I knew, right? That was just the messaging. And I wanted to soothe myself. And I also thought, well, if I do it enough, or if I, maybe I'll find the right person and then I'll get love, right? Instead of this other thing that's been happening. So it's very deeply confusing. And ultimately, it was at in college that I had what I would call really an awakening of consciousness, as well as a sexual and spiritual awakening that happened all the same time. And I was with my boyfriend, and he had started to turn me on to some spiritual books, and he was the one who got me into gemstone healing. And this is like 1990, like in New York City, nobody was into this stuff, back then. Like we were all kind of freaks, and so we didn't talk about it a lot. And I was fascinated because it was landing in my mind and it was landing in my body in such a way that I knew that there was other levels and to not only your experience here in life, but certainly to our experience in lovemaking. And one night we were making love, and it was as if, the heavens parted, and I had basically what I now know is a type of a Kundalini awakening.
Mm.
Okay. So I didn't know what the hell was happening at the time, but all of that energy and all of that sacred energy in my body started to wake up. And he knew about it. He didn't necessarily tell me about it in those words, but it was such a beautiful experience because he knew what was happening, and he was able to stay with me and hold the space for us, and it was beautiful. And I got to cry and cry and cry, and that was the moment that I thought sex will never be the same, right? Like something is different. Cut to many years later, I've now moved to Los Angeles from New York City. And of course, hey, LA, baby, the city of woo, right? And lots of spiritual awakening. And then, I got exposed to a lot of different metaphysical healing. And this is really where I got to come out of the metaphysical closet just as a human, and really dedicated my life towards that. Um, and so that was a beautiful thing. And I started to explore, different types of practices and so on and so forth. But then I got married, and I married a lovely man, and we were great friends. But all of my old trauma started to kick up, which was really interesting because even though our friendship was beautiful, it was just in the sexual arena that all of the old trauma kicked up. And it wasn't anything that, he was doing consciously. Couldn't have been a more loving, kind, just beautiful human. Something about whatever the chemistry was kicked up all of that trauma, and neither one of us really knew how to deal with it because we were both in our 20s, right? We were young. So that marriage did end. We both decided, okay, this is not serving either one of us. And it was at the end of that marriage that I said to myself, okay, what is going on with you, Deborah? Something is clearly happening here that is not good for you. It's not good for relationships. So take the time and dedicate yourself to whatever it is that you need to understand who you are as a woman and who you are as a sexual and sensual and mojoliciously alive woman. Discover that and like just go there, like dedicate yourself to that. And that's what I did. And I went, yeah. So I went
Yes.
down that path.
No, this is great. I just want to pause for a
Mm.
moment, talk a little bit about what you just said before
Mm.
we go on to,
The next part, yeah.
the next part of it. I'm curious. So you said that what you experienced was what you now call a Kundalini awakening. And we don't really need to go into what a Kundalini awakening is here for the audience. Half of them probably are going to be like, oh, that's a bunch of woo stuff anyway. But
Mm.
um, the point is, I'm curious, like, was there something specific that happened? Because, okay, a Kundalini awakening is kind of a big event.
Mhm.
And for some people, it can actually even just blow out their nervous system to the point where they're just like, right? Like, and then they spend a lot of time trying to figure out what just happened to them, and it freaks them out. I'm curious, like, was there something specific that happened or that you were doing? And then how did you experience it in your body? What did it feel like in your body when you had this moment?
Well, what it felt like was, so at first we're making love, right? So it's just, hey, we're making love. It's beautiful. There's an intimacy happening. There's a depth that we hadn't reached before. So it felt um, like yummy, but on the edge of something that is potentially really scary. And so there was a little bit of fear. There was, my body was nervous. There was some like anxious, kind of butterflies happening. And then my breathing pattern started to change. And he kept just making love to me and making, and just, it was like slow and steady. It was just slow and steady what was going on in that realm. And what happened was my breath started to change and it was getting faster. And it was, and then it was becoming very like a pump, you know, like that was starting to happen.
Mhm.
And then it was as if I couldn't breathe. Like my breath was getting stuck close to my throat. It was, so it was very much in my chest, in my belly, all this breath and all this sensation. And then my breath got stuck towards the throat and my eyes got really big. And I remember that's when I started to cry. And I tried to speak. I was like, I can't, like I was trying to say, I can't breathe. And he was talking me just with a few words through it and continued to make love to me. And so I was like feeling all of this sort of pleasure and these sexual feelings while this stuckness then started to like, mm, it's a really bad analogy, but it's like when a pipe gets clogged, okay? And all of a sudden the rotor, gets in and then it's like, and the pipe and the water just flows, right? So that's what it felt like because all of a sudden it was like this dam kind of burst through my throat of breath. And I remember going, oh, I took this giant, giant breath and then I just started sobbing. So
Mhm.
that's, that was the physical experience. And he kept making love to me the entire time. There was no, he didn't stop. And I mean, I've had some similar experiences, along the road after that. That was a long time ago now. um, but I really want to punctuate, for I would say the alpha of the lovers, however you're partnered, whoever is taking that alpha sort of more masculine role, um, that there was not one moment of wavering on his part in terms of holding me, being with me, continuing to make love to me through that whole process. And that allowed that breakthrough to happen.
Yes. So a couple things I want to say about that. First is because you were pretty young, right? You were in your 20s, I think,
I think I
ish.
was 21 at that time.
So the fact that, and I don't know, I'm making an assumption that this man happened to be roughly around your age.
Mhm.
Um, and that is actually truly amazing to find somebody who could hold that kind of space in that moment. And because what most men will do is, oh my God, there's something wrong. What's
Right,
going on? What can I do to fix it? Right. And then
right.
you go right into that, which of course is going to shut the whole experience
No, it
down.
collapses the whole thing.
So the fact that you were able to experience that and that he could hold that space and just keep, going and being, caring, and that is truly amazing. You're very fortunate at that age. Most women cannot find a man like that until they're in their 40s.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
he's a very special human.
yeah. So there's that. And then the other thing is, I'm really glad that you sort of gave your description of what it was like, because I have had conversations with women who've experienced Kundalini awakenings and it scared the crap out of them.
Mhm.
Right. And so it's really good for people who are listening to hear what that is like, because most people, unless you were into some of the more esoteric things, maybe you've studied Tantra, maybe you've studied Kundalini yoga or anything sort of in the energetic realm. Okay, you're familiar with it. When it happens, you might be a little weirded out, but you're like, I think I know what just happened. But most people don't study that stuff. Most people don't know about it. And then this happens to them and then they freak out going, what the fuck just happened to me?
Yeah,
Right. So
that's why we have to talk about it.
that's exactly why we have to talk about it. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question about what did it feel like in your body and what was your actual experience? Because I wanted people to hear what that's actually like.
Mhm.
Um, a friend of mine is a woman who she wrote a couple of books, one of which I think it's simply called "What Is Tantra." It's a fantastic book, but she also wrote one called "My Life with Kundalini," where she describes a very similar experience to that
Mm.
and how it really freaked her out and like messed her up for a while because she didn't know what was going on with her
Mhm.
body. So the more that we can shed light on that, the more we can avoid people having to go through this, like, I don't know, there's something wrong with me. I don't ever want to do that again. Because some people, the reaction is to actually shut down as a result of that, rather than allowing it to be the opening that it was meant to be.
Absolutely. Well, look, It can be, as you were saying, incredibly scary because it is such a rush of life force. That's what it is. It is a rush of our life force moving through our bodies. And particularly, I mean, I can't even imagine, frankly, if I was having that awakening now in our 21st century, in, being on a phone and computers and everything that we have now that is numbing us from our life force, because this happened to me 30, years ago. So it
Years
was,
ago.
it was a different world. And yes, of course, there were distractions, but not like we have today in terms of like literally taking us away from ourselves. And so, um, and that's one of the reasons. I mean, I'm just going to mention this now, but we can talk more about it whenever. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book Undressed, is because it actually is in 7 sections based on the 7 power centers of the body. And so when we're talking about this Kundalini awakening and really having your life force surge and your body open up so that you can let that amount of life force and pleasure and joy and enthusiasm and health and vibrancy run through your body, it does that through your 7 power centers. And that's why, if you've never done any sort of energetic work, or you've not done, yoga practices or these types of things, or worked with your power centers, it can feel so intense because it literally it's like almost short circuit your system if you're unaware of what's going on, and certainly if you're not open to what's going on.
Yeah. So, okay. You've gone and done it now. You've gone into the realm of chakras and the esoteric.
Oh
So
dear.
let's just talk a little bit about that to the audience so they understand what we're talking about here.
Sure.
So there are 7 chakras. They correspond to what science has now discovered are areas with a higher nerve concentration. So they're bundles of nerves. And so, I have a background in Tantra. So aside from being a sexologist, I'm also a certified Tantra counselor. So we work a lot in these realms with these types of things. And so from that perspective, what they would say is that, for various potential reasons, whether it's sickness or trauma or whatever, those areas can get shut down. Right. And so if you think about, an area of your body goes numb, right? Well, that's the nerves just deciding that they, for whatever reason, whether it's trauma, whatever, they're not going to feel anything in this moment. Well, that can literally happen in these areas of, dense nerve endings, and you can literally not feel stuff. And so what happens in a particular situation like a Kundalini awakening is all of a sudden they all just open up and that energy just flows through them all. And you're feeling stuff that you probably haven't felt before, or maybe not to that extent. So this is kind of like a super brief overview. What are we talking about when we're talking about chakras and energy centers? We could do many, many shows on just that alone. But I will say this for anybody listening who is like, this is a bunch of sort of woo-woo, bullshit. Having worked with people for a long time and having had this, training and awareness and understanding, I have seen when you can remove a block in a specific chakra, somebody's life absolutely transform.
100%.
I had a conversation many, many years ago with a friend, because he knew the work that I did, talking to me about just, learning to control his ejaculation and how, he just would have like basically no control. He would get too excited and then boom. And, there's more to it than that. I don't remember all the details, but back at that time, I said, well, it sounds to me probably like your second or third chakra is completely shut down and you're not able to move all that energy that's building up through the rest of your body. So it has to explode out somewhere. It was an approach to solving that from the perspective that, Tantra or chakras would see it. And simply by getting him to learn how to move energy through his body and work through the different blocks that he had, he actually was able to shift the physical performance of his body. So this stuff really works. I'm not saying that's the cure for everybody, but these things are real and they do potentially work. All right. Wow, I can't even believe we are halfway through the show already, and there's so much more to get to. Let me just take a quick pause because I got a lot more questions for you about this. All right. Are you a couple? Are your relationship and sex life where you want them to be? Are there challenges you would like to make but just don't know how? Maybe you think there's nothing that can be done. If you are not 100% happy with where your relationship or sex life is, then get help today and change your life. Go to kevinandceline.com/sex-coaching-couples. I know it's a long link. Don't worry, it's in the description. Schedule a strategy call with me today so we can map out a strategy to get you where you want to be so that you can have it all your way and have the relationship of your dreams and the best sex of your life. That is kevinandceline.com/sex-coaching-couples. The link is in the description below. All right. So I paused you because I really want to go back and talk about, what it feels like, to have a Kundalini awakening. Then we kind of went down the chakra rabbit hole a little bit, but I know there's more to your story. So I want you to pick up from where we left off, if you can remember where that is.
Yeah. So, really when I went on this journey after my marriage to discover what do I need? What is it going to mean to be a fully embodied woman? What is it going to mean to like own my sexuality and my sensuality in such a way that it is first mine, that I know what pleases me. So then I can really join with a partner to, not have them fill something, but to truly have just a beautiful co-created experience. And so I went on this journey, and the stories in Undressed, people are like, why did you write about your sex life, Deborah? And I said, it's not because I need you to know about my sex life. Number one, because we do need to hear, though, more real life stories of people's sexual experiences, and to have that become more normalized. It's still at dinner parties, or if you dare talk about sex at a dinner party, right? But it's still like these hushed or just when the girls are around, or I don't know what guys do. I know they talk, but not the way that we ladies talk. And it's got to become more normalized so that we can all really let go of this extraordinary shame that still exists around sex.
Every dinner party my wife and I ever went to, we would end up talking about sex openly in front of everybody.
Thank you. Exactly.
That's why we started this show, by the way, was to have these types of conversations, because they need to be talked about. And one of the best pieces of feedback that we've gotten many times over the years is, it's amazing how you guys can talk so openly about this. Like, you actually give us permission to do so. Yes. And that's the whole point.
That's the same feedback that I've had all these years. And that's, you just got to keep doing it. Because there many more of us need to keep doing it so that it can become so normalized. So, the experiences that I wrote about, these memoir pieces in the book, are about these wonderful lovers that I experienced along this road of awakening, that I realized when I looked back, each of those experiences actually helped to sort of light up one of these power centers, right? We were talking about how they have certain qualities and connect to certain parts of our lives. And each of these moments, there are 6 lovers that I write about. And then the 7th experience was with myself. So it was a self-pleasuring moment that totally woke me up to the fullness of my womanness, my sexuality, my sensuality, and being able to understand it and claim it.
Okay, so now you have opened the box.
I guess I like to do that.
So would you be willing to share one of those moments, one of those stories? Obviously, I don't expect the entire, in-depth explanation that I'm sure is in the book, but yeah, could you share one that was, pivotal for you?
Yeah, it's hard because they were all so pivotal. And I will share. So there was an experience I had with this lovely, they were all quite lovely. Lovely humans and lovely men. And this was one that happened within the year after I'd left the marriage. And I thought, oh, I was visiting my sister, and I thought, oh, she was we were at a party, and I met someone, and we had a lovely connection, and you just thought, oh, this is going to be a fun weekend, right? We're just going to have some fun together. And it ended up turning into this beautiful love affair. And what ended up happening was the way that he was with me just in life, and then of course the way that he uh, shared himself with me in bed cracked my heart open. And I did not know how hard my heart had become in protecting itself once I did leave the marriage, right? So my heart was in such a state of, well, protection, discomfort, part of it, a brokenness in a way. And so there was like plenty of walls that were standing there. And through my experience with this lover, and we were together really 5 times in 5 months. It was a I don't know, kind of a brief but very potent love affair. It absolutely cracked open the walls of my heart. And like he knew in some way, I don't know if it was conscious or not, but he certainly knew in some way how to dismantle those walls through through the way that he physically loved me and the way that he physically pleasured me. Right. There was such a sense of admiration for the female form, for this is going to sound, because I do live half on the woo side of the street and half on, the reality New York City side of the street. That it was very much of like a cherishing and a worshiping of the goddess within, worshiping of that queen within the woman. And I had not experienced that to that extent at that point in my life. And what I realized was, oh my, like my heart just blasted open. And while it was sad that we didn't go further, because I thought maybe we would, it completely made sense of why the two of us, sort of tangoed and what we brought to each other's lives.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm glad you went into it because, of course, the next question on my mind was like, what specifically did he do? And you did cover that. It's the you said sort of worship and admiration for the feminine. And I'm so
Mm-hmm.
glad that you brought that up because this is a piece that a lot of men just really don't understand.
Mm-mm.
And it's actually a subject that's really been up for me lately as far as how I can teach this better. It's something that I do very naturally and that I've always done because I've always seen the beauty and the power and just the amazingness of the feminine. But what I see when I work with people is too many men in this sort of adversarial role, looking at the feminine as, an adversary, one that they don't understand, one that's like
Right.
in an enigma. And
Right.
like, it's like, how do I get what I need out of this without incurring too much, conflict? And so, yeah, it's something that I've really been thinking about a lot lately is how can I teach people to see it from the point of view that I see it from? Because you're absolutely right. When you show up for a woman like that and you hold great space and you cherish her and you show her, you reflect back to her the divine nature that she probably hasn't seen because nobody else has, reflected that back to her, it absolutely shifts everything.
Mm-hmm.
It shifts everything.
Well, yeah, I
And it's
mean, the
the only
woman
way
will
to
then,
really open her up.
yeah, I mean, then the woman wants, the amount of pleasure and what is possible at that point is endless. Because when space is held for the feminine and when that blossoming occurs, you can have anything. Truly. I mean, and I know this from my own experience. I know this from the women that I work with, and their experiences. But here's the thing that we haven't talked about yet, and I think this is really important, especially in light of this piece of the conversation. Women first need to get comfortable with their own bodies and be okay in their own skin. And that is a hugely challenging thing for a woman to open herself up to and be willing to do, because there's also an enormous amount of fear and an enormous amount of concern just about exploring herself. And the other thing that I think you're talking about when, on a man's side of the street, this is, I mean, for men and women, but it's a level of consciousness. And that's, this is the soapbox that I've been standing on for nearly 20 years now, which is that, your sex and your spirit, your higher consciousness, however you relate to that. All right. It's those things are one and the same. And we, society and culture and religion loves to keep that separate.
Oh, very, very much on purpose. I'm really glad that you brought this part up. It actually is a question on my list. We just hadn't quite gotten there, but now is the perfect time.
Okay, so yeah, and why, is it better for society and culture and religion to keep it separate? Is because then we are more controllable, right?
Yeah, we're disempowered.
We're disempowered. Exactly. So it's about bringing those two together. So when it's like, okay, men, how do you hold space? How do you, hold space and create a deliciousness for, the divine feminine in your lover? Well, you got to connect with your own consciousness first, right? You need to be in that space of like, hang on a second. This isn't just about like the position. How do I get her off? What's the thing that's going to bring her to the orgasm? What, sexual technique and trick, all those things are cool to know. But ultimately, it's about being in that space, like in the now moment with this other rental vehicle. I mean, yeah, it's a body, but there's a whole other soul being that is within that skin. And when you join with another like that, that's when you're going to have the most delicious sex. And yes, it could even be a one-night stand. It doesn't have to be necessarily a long-term relationship to have that kind of communion with a lover. And I think that's really important to know.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the way you put that kind of communion, and that it could even be in a one-night stand. And the reason why I think that's kind of interesting or important to share is that it's important for people to know that this is possible in almost any circumstance if both people show up willing and able to do it. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, this type of communion is the way it was always meant to be. Mm-hmm. This is what coming together sexually is supposed to be. It's just that we've been so disempowered, so lied to, so led astray that what we think is normal communion in the realm of sexuality, man and woman coming together, isn't actually what it's supposed to be. It's that what our sort of new normal isn't really the real normal. The real normal is what you're describing. That's what it should be when a man and woman come together.
And we've gotten so sidetracked about it's about the orgasm. It's not about the orgasm, everybody. Those are fun. Those are fun. It can feel really yummy. I'm not mad at orgasms, but it's not about the orgasm. Right?
Oh, this is another huge one. I spend so much time teaching people, if you can let go of the destination of the orgasm, you will likely have more, bigger, better ones later on. But you got to let go of the agenda of getting there in order for that to happen.
Exactly. And we all get caught up on it, right? It's like all of a sudden you can like feel it coming and the rise and the rise and the rise. And it's like, okay, I want to be on that, or, get there. And it's like, just like be with it.
Especially for women, because women honestly have been let down so much by the average man's performance, in a sense that we know all the studies, man, one study, he only lasts 3 to 5 minutes, the other study 5 to 7 minutes, and in every study she's 25 to 30 minutes, and honestly that's given them that's a short time. For some women it could be 40 minutes, it could be an hour, right? Like, so this idea that when women start to get close to their orgasm, they're like, I just got to grab it. I got to grab it right now, because if I don't, it's gone and it's never coming back again, right? Because he's going to finish and then we're done, right? So I understand why that is, but that's where we have to teach both men, okay, here's how you last longer, here's how you hold space, here's how you show up in that way that we were just describing.
Yeah.
And then, women, it's like, don't just rush for the quick clitoral orgasm. Take your time, slow down, build that energy. You'll have bigger ones. You'll hit G-spot orgasms. You'll end up hopefully, with an earth-shattering, cervical orgasm. But that stuff comes later on if you can get there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the stuff that I write about. And the whole work that I've developed, and certainly it's just through my own experience and obviously all the trainings that I've now done, but for over 20 years it's been about supporting women in really reclaiming their own mojo, which is that life force, which is that erotic nature. I mean, I call your eros, your erotic nature, it's like mojo plus your desire, right? So mojo's life force, you can call it chi, ki, prana, sexual energy, whatever culture you happen to be coming from, it's all the same thing. It's the stuff that animates all of life. And even quantum physics, for those of you who are not necessarily woo inclined, quantum physics has proven it at this point. It's called the Higgs boson. We could go down, that's a whole other conversation. But in any case, mojo, your life force, is real. And then eros is that life force plus your desire. So, what is it that you actually desire? And when you combine it with that life force, oh my gosh, like talk about pleasure of the ultimate form. And my deep dedication is to support. I mean, I love men, and you're doing great work. And so there's, you handle that side of the street. But like, my deep dedication is supporting women in being able to find a space where they can explore themselves in this particular way, so that there can be, when you're ready to, have the ultimate experiences and these sexual experiences with your lover, with your spouse, with your partner, whenever and wherever. But I really do believe, very much so, that a woman has to have a knowing of herself in a depth, that to have a relationship in that way with herself before she can truly, truly have like these epic things that we're talking about with a partner. Sometimes you can, of course, explore it with a partner. I write about that in the book, obviously, the experiences I had. So it's not like you have to, go and hide out in a cave and, figure it all out by yourself, ladies. But there is something to be said, and it's an experiential thing. And so to put words and language to it is very difficult. But there's something to be said for when you know your own pleasure, and you know your body, and you know your parts, you know what your cervix feels like at what time of the month, because your cervix is moving and shifting throughout the month, right? So having those kinds of um, knowings about yourself. What does your clitoris feel like? Can you feel the clitoral bulbs? Which are along your labia, underneath your labia, right? How does it feel when you pinch your own nipples or when you lightly brush them? I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to explore the pleasure within you by yourself. So when you finally do understand that, and now you are sitting with or lying with a partner, there's more freedom in your skin instead of concern and nervousness. And what do I look like? And is that cellulite or that stretch mark showing? Or I don't know, or is this going to feel good? Or I don't know how to express myself. Like, can I tell him? Da, 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 right? All of that can be much, much quieter once you've had the experience with yourself, for yourself, and by yourself.
Yeah, and I love that part about really starting with yourself, which kind of, we're like really close to the end of the show, and I have
Oh,
a lot more questions, which
okay.
we're not going to be able to get to them all. But one of them was, how can somebody go about starting on this journey? And I think the first part of the answer is to start with yourself, right?
Hmm. For sure. It's absolutely starting with yourself. Most women that come to work with me, I'm talking over 20 years now, and of all ages, right? From 20s to 70s, all the, and all the decades in between. Most of them have not looked at their vulvas ever. And the rest of them have looked at it, but it was a long time ago. Okay.
Hmm.
You have to look. I mean, no two vulvas are the same, which is so delicious and beautiful and wonderful. And I mean, just get a glass of wine or whatever it is that you like, and just take a look. You're gorgeous, right? So really start to look at yourself. Because if you can't look at yourself, it's going to be very difficult to have deep pleasure. Because if you're not having a relationship where you can look, that right there is a deep level of shame.
Yeah, this is a lot of the work that my wife used to do with women, all of this stuff that you are also doing. So I'm so glad that there's still people out there doing this work,
Mm.
um, because it is very much needed. And I always used to say, for years, I would say, I'm amazed at how many women don't even know what their own genitals look like. Because from my perspective as a man, I'm like, we know it forwards, backwards, inside out, upside down, every birthmark we have thoroughly explored it. And I had another guest on the show a while back, sometime in the last year, where I had said that same thing. And she actually gave a really great explanation as to why that is, with, societal programming and the shaming and
Mhm.
all these other things.
Exactly.
And, so I understand why. And yet at the same time, it's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And that's what the whole book Undressed is like, if you want to know where to start, that's the place to start because it walks you through sexual and spiritual practices to be able to get comfortable in your own skin. And I have to say, I mean, I wrote the book for women, but what's been fascinating to me over these months that now that it's been out in the world is the reaction that men are having to reading it. And I'm getting DMs and people are writing reviews and men are saying, thank you. I feel like I got, into a woman's mind and I just, I understand women better. There was one man who said, I'm 60, I've been awkward my whole life, and now I feel like I can actually go out there and date with some more confidence. That was, I mean, wow. Just you never know what your babies are going to do once they're in the world, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but I think, obviously start to know your own body, to look at your body, to be able to carve out some time. That's the thing also in this fast world of fast food, fast cars, fast fucking. It's like, let's slow down for a second. And that includes you and you. If you need to make a date with yourself and have some self-care time, a lot of ladies are thinking, oh, I'm going to, do my mask on the face tonight. I'll do a hair mask, maybe I'll like do a little pedicure or something. They think, oh, a massage, like that self-care. Lovely. But no, take a real self-pleasure care date with yourself. Could be a half an hour. It doesn't have to be like an entire weekend, but spend some time specifically with your body, touching your skin, maybe giving yourself a bit of an oil massage, rub your own breasts, see what that, it inspires for you. Cup your vulva with your hand. I mean, there's so many things I could go on and on and on about how you can do this. The important thing is to carve out the time to be able to do it. Because if you don't put it on your calendar, and it's sometimes just like when you're in a relationship, right? If you don't write down, we're going to have a date night tonight, baby, right? Like it's not going to happen. We're all living such full, busy, wonderful, rich lives, but you got to put time in for yourself.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. I love all the things that you are helping women with and all the things that you are teaching them. Since my wife has passed, one of the things that has been challenging for me is to be able to get that type of information across to
Mm.
women. I intellectually know it all, but I'm not a woman, right? So I can only talk about, here's what Celine would say about it, or here's what, clients have, described it to me. But being able to actually be in a physical body and share your personal experiences about how it actually felt for you in your body and the things that you did, I think is tremendously valuable. And I'm really glad that there are people out there that are doing that work.
And yours.
So, okay, so many more questions. I really wanted to dive in this episode into, the sex and spirituality piece, and whether or not they're separate or not, which we touched on very
Yeah.
very surface level.
They're not, by the
Unfortunately,
way.
yes. And anybody that's listened to my show knows that because I've covered this in multiple other episodes
Yeah.
with other people. But every time I have an opportunity to talk about it, I like to talk about it because I really want to just hammer that point home that they are not separate.
Yeah.
Just like you said earlier, you can call it mojo, you can call it chi, you can call it jing, you can call it life force energy, universal energy. There's a couple more I'm not even recalling at the moment, but it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I like to keep reinforcing that theme throughout all of these episodes because
Beautiful.
as you mentioned earlier, there has been a deliberate attempt to separate our sexuality from our spirituality in an attempt to disempower and control us. And the only
Mm.
way we can shift that is if we realize that they are not separate and that they are all the same thing. If we can unite them and bring them back together, we suddenly become a whole lot more powerful in our lives and how we show up in the way that we can take control over our own lives rather than having somebody dictate to us.
Yeah. Well, everything shows up in the bedroom. So, the way you are as a lover, right, is very much the way you are in the world as well.
That I've never really thought about it actually in that way, which is interesting. It's very rare that a guest comes on and states something that I hadn't actually thought about, but I've never really thought about it in exactly those terms, which is, yeah, how you show up in the bedroom is likely how you show up in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, I work with a lot of men who deal with premature ejaculation. And a couple of years ago, I noticed a pattern repeated in those particular men. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. And I was hesitating at first to bring it up with men, but then I just said, all right, we got to go there. We got to talk about this. And every time I have seen this pattern and I have brought it up to a client, they've gone, oh, you're right. And that pattern is this. A lot of men who suffer from premature ejaculation are the types of men that want everything right away. They're impatient. They want everything right away.
Mm.
And so when I see a man, and I can usually tell this in the first 5 minutes that I'm talking to him, when I see him and I just ask him general questions about, oh, okay, what do you do for a living? And I just get a little bit of a picture of like who they are, and I can instantly see that pattern show up. They want everything right away. And it's just
Interesting.
right. So, but this
Yeah,
is an
very interesting.
illustration of exactly what you just
Yeah.
said. How
Yeah.
you show up in the bedroom is how you show up in the rest of your life. In the bedroom, they want to go straight for that ejaculation, and they don't even consciously know that they're doing that, right?
Mhm.
And then they're wondering, well, why can't I last longer? It's because all you're focused on is I got to get straight to that thing
Right.
because
Get the result, get the thing.
you want everything right here, right now,
Yeah.
immediately, right?
Yeah.
And so, but we can pinpoint that pattern in the bedroom by looking at their life outside the bedroom,
Yeah.
and vice versa, right? So,
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? So much of the way we control ourselves and we don't realize we control ourselves, or the way that we, like hold things close to our chest. And so we're like clamped down. A lot of women have a challenge orgasming with a partner. They can orgasm fine on their own, but if they're with a partner, not necessarily. And so it's like, oh, that, in terms of intimacy or being comfortable, really becoming vulnerable, these are things that we can look to, and it sounds like it's a whole other episode, but I'm glad that at least I, scratched the surface of something that has not been talked about here before.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation. I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about. And at the same time, there's no way in an hour show we can possibly cover everything there is to know about a topic. The idea is to give people enough that they're interested to want to know more. And so if they do want to know more, how do they find you?
Well, Instagram is the place that I like to play the most. So you can find me on Instagram at Deborah Kagan, and my website as well, Deborah-Kagan.com. That's where you can get all sorts of, there's a free video training there. But in light of this conversation, I really invite, and I hope that all of the listeners, if this has sparked something in you, that you do go and grab a copy of Undressed. The book is Undressed, an invitation to claim your erotic nature. And that is going to support you in not only understanding this topic so much better, but giving you a real life, entree into how to work with your spirit and your sex and put them together. And it's such anyway, you can read the reviews. I love it. Of course, it's my baby, but it really is, it's a great experience. And
I would love to actually read that myself because obviously I'm a man, but um, if it really does help men get a better understanding of women and where they're at, then I would love to put it on my reading list that I give to all of my clients and people that
beautiful.
sign up for my vault of free stuff.
Yeah.
Um, because it's interesting, like from the perspective of a man, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be turning 50 very shortly,
Welcome to
and
the club.
thank you. And I would say it probably took me about 40 years to truly understand women. I know it's a bold claim. It's a bold claim to say I understand women. I'm not saying that I understand everything there is to know about them, but there are some fundamental parts of understanding women
Mm.
that I do at this point in my life finally understand. And when you do understand that as a man, it's like the enigma of the woman is suddenly no longer an enigma. It suddenly becomes stupid simple. If you just understand a few basic things about how they operate and what they need to
Mm.
feel safe in this world and in this relationship and in their sexuality, it's just like, how did it take 40 years, especially, I granted I haven't been doing this work for 40 years, but I've been doing it for over a decade. And I was on a long, personal development journey for many years before I ever even did this work. And it still took me that long. So imagine, what the journey's like for most other people.
Yeah, it's actually quite simple. And we like to think that things can be more complicated. And the thing about the feminine that's I think so fascinating and frustrating to the masculine, and I'm talking qualities of energy, anyhow, in terms of the binary here, but not necessarily gender, but yeah, the thing that's so frustrating and fascinating about the feminine is that once you think, right, that you've like figured it out, the feminine loves to just then throw in another curveball to keep you on your toes. So there
For
are
sure.
certain
She's,
fundamentals, right? There are certain fundamentals that, as you were
yes.
saying, when you know them, that we then, in terms of those of us who live more in our feminine for the majority of our life, that we just then want to give you everything. Right. As I mentioned that
Mhm.
once before, it's like when you hold that space for us in the bedroom, and certainly when you hold that space in life, it's just one of the most gorgeous gifts that you can give.
It's the key that really unlocks the
Mm.
amazingness and powerfulness of the feminine, but she's
Mhm.
not going to unlock unless certain things are
Mm-mm.
met. And it's really actually not that complicated once you understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yay that you're out there teaching those things because we do need that so badly.
Yes, yes, we do. All right. Well, there's one last question that I have to ask you, even though we're a little bit over time, because I
Mm.
ask it to all the guests. Should be a pretty easy question for you. And that is, what is your best sexual talent?
That's hilarious. My best sexual talent. Um, I would say the thing that's coming through, because I mean, let's face it, there are many, but
I'm sure there are.
but honestly, the thing that I get feedback on the most, I would say, is that how how comfortable and how good, so to create the space also and to co-create the space for my lover and a man. I'm mostly with, men for my entire life. To feel amazing in their own skin and to feel great about themselves.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's something like that I hear feedback on all the time.
Well, that's wonderful. I always believe that in any partnership, and even if you're just coming together for lovemaking, that is a form of partnership, that our goal really is to lift each other up through the
Yes.
experience. So,
Yes. Yeah. So
hmm
that's it. I think the greatest skill is to like leave them better. I don't want to say better because there's nothing wrong with how they were when they showed up, but more elevated, within themselves. right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think that is my greatest skill.
Well, that is a fantastic skill to have amongst the many others I'm sure you also possess.
You
All
can
right,
read the
well,
book. You read the book, you'll learn a lot more about those.
I'm looking forward to it. All right, everybody. I hope that you found that interesting. I think that it was valuable for both men and women. Obviously, if you're a woman and you've had a glimpse into an awakening, this maybe could give you an idea of what to do next or how to dive into that journey. If you haven't yet had a glimpse, maybe this would pique some interest in starting to want to go in that direction. But also, for the men listening, I mean, you heard some of what women need. You heard some of what their experience is. So if you happen to be on the receiving end of that, you might know a little bit better now how to react in that situation. And you might also know a little bit better about what she needs from you on your end. So hopefully it was valuable for both men and women. All right, Deborah, thank you one more time for coming on the show and sharing your story.
I'm so grateful to be here, and thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that's all the time that I have for this episode, and I will see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoyed this show, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinandceline.com/vault. That's kevinandceline.com/vault. Thanks for listening, and remember, as Celine used to say, you're amazing.